Today we'll be taking a look at the LG G2 Gallery Series OLED up against the Samsung QN90B Neo QLED. These two TVs couldn't be more different. We've talked about the differences before when we're talking about LCD versus OLED, but this is a little bit of a different comparison because the OLED that we're talking about in question can get a little bit brighter than your traditional OLED TV thanks to the new panel that is also supported by a heatsink. One of the great things about the LG G2 OLED is that if you're a fan of white highlights, the OLEDs typically aren't able to get to the same brightness level as the LG G2. But on the flip side, the LG G2 still can't hold a candle, no pun intended, to the QN90B when it comes to brightness. The biggest separation between the G2 and the QN90B is going to be the brightness levels. So while we're on the topic of brightness, I need to talk to you guys about the average picture level when you are looking at scenes that have high average picture levels. Oftentimes these are daylight scenes. You really do see when the sunlight comes through and it's a big factor in the picture. You see that difference on the QN90B, where on the G2 it does look a little bit flat. And it doesn't seem like the impact of the highlights are there in HDR for the G2 when it's next to the QN90B. On its own, the G2 does look spectacular in a lot of these scenes, and I don't think many people will have a problem with it. But the QN90B is just on a whole nother level on these scenes, and you really can see the difference when they are side by side specifically for these scenes. Anytime there is an emphasis on bright highlights, especially big bright highlights, that is where you see the QN90B just take over and show its strengths. Now moving on, let's talk about the contrast. There's no doubt about it when we're talking about the G2 versus the QN90B. The contrast difference is pretty big in a lot of the darker scenes, and this is where you see the G2 separate from the QN90B. I see these differences come through really big in some of the games that I play that are set in the dark or in darker areas. It's mainly because it is a self-lit OLED panel, and there is no substituting that for those types of scenes. The QN90B tries to do really good in these areas, and I think if you're looking at it on its own, it's probably fine for most people. But when you're looking at it next to an OLED, you do see the cracks start to show. You are getting a more cloudy presentation in these darker scenes, in these nighttime scenes for the QN90B. And some of the torches and lights that you see have a little bit more of a glow. Not necessarily bad blooming or anything like that, but there are a little bit more emphasis on those areas, and it can stick out sometimes depending on the scene. But I do think the dark scenes are good enough for most people on the QN90B, and if you're not looking at it next to an OLED, you're probably fine with it. Just like I'm speaking to some of the daytime scenes on the G2, I think as long as you're not used to this LCD level brightness for those daytime scenes, then the G2 daytime scenes will probably be fine for you. But when you put them up against each other and they're side by side, that's where you see the stark differences. So one of the biggest differences with the G2 and the QN90B is the price tag. Now, when we're talking about getting a 77-inch G2, if you are in that market, it's $3,600 right now for its price. On the flip side, you can get an 85-inch QN90B for $2,800 on the Black Friday deal. So yeah, that's an $800 difference. If you're somebody who does want bright punchiness, I do think that the QN90B at a larger size, for those that can't quite wait for a 77-inch QD OLED, might satisfy you more than you think. So I know a couple of people that went the LCD route with the 85-inch this year, and whether that be the X95K or the QN90B, they are absolutely just blown away at the picture quality. I think both TVs are amazing, but both TVs also have something to worry about depending on the size. Uniformity is going to be the elephant in the room for both of these TVs, and specifically the QN90B is going to have a dirty screen effect chance on all sizes, and in the larger sizes, it may be more noticeable. It is a panel lottery, and you have to kind of get lucky if you're going to get a good DSE or bad DSE. And really, all LCD TVs are going to have some sort of DSE. It's whether or not it bothers you in real content that's going to make the difference. The LG G2 side of things, it can have uniformity issues as well. I've seen some pretty bad vertical banding going on out there. And of course, the pink tint issue. Now, this is especially something that you want to worry about on the 65-inch version, as those have been plagued with some of the pink tint issues. And the larger sizes, I have seen some very clean examples on the G2, but also if you're looking at 83-inch, I know my boy Classy had a pretty bad panel for the 83-inch size. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that you always worry about as a TV buyer is the uniformity. And no matter what, guys, the TV that you buy has a risk of having uniformity issues. When it comes down to gaming on both of these TVs is pretty fantastic. The thing that I want you guys to focus on is what kind of gamer are you? If you're a gamer that really wants bright, punchy, vivid colors, the QN90B is the choice. If you're a gamer that wants HDR that is going to be accurate, then you're probably going to want to look at the G2. As it does have HGIG, you are getting the most accurate version of the games that you are playing. For some people, that may not be bright enough. The other thing you should be aware of is the frame rates of the games that you're playing and how they affect the TV that you are playing on. If you're going to play a lot of 30 frames per second games that are locked at 30 frames per second, at this frame rate, games don't feel as fluid on an OLED TV. Also, on this LCD TV in particular, you do have Game Motion Plus, which will help out 30 frames per second games, and it will make it feel a lot smoother to a lot of users. Now, on the other side of that, if you're a gamer who does a lot of first-person shooter, a lot of 60 frames per second fast-paced games, the LG OLED is going to be the choice over the QN90B for a lot of people who value fluidity in their games. There's no beating an OLED TV when it comes to this fast motion gaming. All right, so one more downside that I really have to call out about the QN90B is going to be some of the service updates that you can get. The firmware is going to be hit or miss, and sometimes it can change the entire look of the TV and sometimes create a lot of problems. So my suggestion to you, if you get this TV, if you're really happy with the picture quality and there's nothing that you want to change with it, go ahead and just turn the TV automatic updates off. But go a step further, because sometimes you can even get automatic updates, and just take the TV offline and use your favorite streaming device. Honestly, I would use your favorite streaming device with any TV you get, as these TV OSs are really bad and slow. What do you guys think? Tell me in the comments below, which one would you choose? Also, are you going to be buying a TV this year at all? If so, tell me which one it is below. Also, if you guys have any more questions on the QN90B or LG G2, just leave them in the comments as well. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and consider subscribing for more future videos. If you guys want to keep watching the side-by-sides, check out this one right here.